Are we fine now? You'll tell us then when we. Hello. Good afternoon and welcome again to our story coming from Calvary on Earth Church. Today is our penultimate episode of this series. We originally we wanted to start with about 8 episodes. We are on episode number 7. Next week will be our final one in this season. So we'd like to encourage all of you to please give us some feedback. What do you think worked? What do you think didn't work? Are there other areas where you want us to focus on? What particularly do you like or do you not like? In fact, in particular, to all our pathfinders and master guides in Southern Africa, this really was to pique your interest in the local heritage, church heritage. And we'd like to find out from you, have we done justice? Are there areas which we believe maybe we have not touched? Please talk to us so that as we then start the next series, we know exactly and can focus on those areas of interest to you. Once again, we apologize for starting a bit late with minor technical issues, but it's all sorted out now. Bamkos, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Bamkos, today I wanted us to talk about something. When I was young, I was intrigued that every time we had to go to church, we went to a school. In fact, when I started school, at Sizanani Primary School, in fact, I remember that because that's where I remember my first recollection of you was there. I think you were staying in the school property or something.
No, I was the school board secretary.
Oh, okay. Because
I was at work.
Oh, okay. I used to see you a lot then because I didn't know exactly what you were doing. So that's my first recollection of you, by the way.
That building was an office of the Dube Mufulo School Board.
Okay. Okay. Now, coming back, my experience was this, that my first day of school at Sizanani, Sub A, my teacher was Mrs. Mzobe.
Okay.
Still remember. We went to exactly the same place where I used to attend church.
On Sabbath, yes.
On Sabbath. In fact, I sat at the same
desk,
chair and desk, during the week and again on Sabbath. And I remember in my mind thinking, man, I wish I was a member of the Roman Catholic Church, because where I stayed, Azola, opposite our house, we had a Roman Catholic Church, and it was always nice there. And I thought, why is it? During the week, I'm in the same place. In the evening, I'm in the same place. Even when I tried to visit Zola Church, guess what? We were also at school, at Busisiwe Primary School. And that was generally the experience. Which just makes me wonder, Bamkos. And again, let me say, in my mind as a young person, I actually hated the concept of going to church because there was nothing interesting. It was exactly the same experience as I had 5 days a week.
Mother, let me tell you something. There are parts of the country where that condition has not changed. I also stayed for a whole 7 years in Pretoria in a classroom. I taught in a different school, but on Sabbath, I went to another school. Now, that type of experience is a way of giving you an inferior concept of what church is about, what God is about. And I've noticed that churches who often go to institutions where there is no church, there is no church in a school, don't grow sufficiently. Their membership cannot grow fast enough because they're constrained by space.
again, that's really what I wanted to do in terms of saying, linking that to church growth within Southern Africa. Is it maybe one of the reasons why, for example, that for the longest of time, we never really grew as a church in Southern Africa, especially amongst Black Adventists?
You may remember the session where the TC and the TOC were supposed to merge.
Yes.
We were hardly 200, we were around 250,000. And yet in 1910, the African independent churches were 50,000. Now they are anywhere, they are between 32 and 35% of South Africa's Christian community. They range between 3 and 4 million. 6 million.
Sure.
And yet we claim these people. You see, Adventists are holding to a myth that if you have the truth will help the church to grow. It doesn't. Truth grows within a particular sociological climate. So Adventist churchmanship in the black community never took cognizance of the fact that we had to be in a church in order to grow. We're a denomination. We're called a church, but we never went to church. We went to school for 6 days a week.
Because now this experience is very diametrically opposed and different to other institutions, for example. Like I said, I honestly wished I was a Roman Catholic for some time because it was nice. I used to visit their church. It was nice being at church. It was a different experience completely. Now, let me ask you a question. Is this the same experience of Adventists throughout the world?
Well, partly, but to a large extent not. And I'm glad we're discussing this today because we have to unpack the reasons why Black Adventists go to schools for church.
Yes.
We've unpacked the reasons why we keep moving from one place to another, hiring facilities that we don't use, going to campsites that are not ours. When the missionaries came here, Adventist missionaries in the late 1800s, they came with the baggage of, number one, shorter Oxford logic, to the view that black people came from a lower stage of creation or semi-evolution. In fact, in the 1870s, Ellen White and others had to battle whites who argued within the church that black people were not candidates for salvation and that they should not be evangelized. They should only be biblicized for domestic reasons so that they can behave well and work for them, for whites and so on. So for some years now, those hangovers rest in the white community of the South African church. We will illustrate this with a number of examples in the course of this discussion.
Yes.
But here is the point I want us to establish. Ellen White says a pastor must not leave a church after an effort until certain mechanisms have been fixed. This itinerant preaching, evangelizing, has harmed the black church. I think of the number of places my father went to as an evangelist, and some of those places never had a church. We never had a church in Ladysmith. We went into a school. The first time I went to a church was when I was in secondary school. All my primary school years, I was in a classroom, 6 days a week. Well, and it did not make sense to me. It did not make sense to me.
I was lucky that I actually went to Teguatema Church also in my young. So at least there was a church.
That's
Godisang,
right.
yes, at Godisang.
And what's worse, we went to public schools. These schools were not owned by the church. They were owned by the state or the community. And you stay there. Let me give you a practical example.
Yes.
I was in a church in Soweto recently, a month before this whole epidemic sprang up.
The COVID-19.
Yes. And in the pew where I was, there was a girl writing things. She asked from her mother a piece of paper and a pen. And she wrote schoolwork on Sabbath. Plurals and other things, mathematics. And so, I took this paper away when she finished, and I went home. I said to my wife, you see, this girl is in a school. There's no church here, and nothing in the service is about her. The only thing she can remember is yesterday's story. She was writing maths during the summer school lesson, diminutives of animals and so on. And I said to myself, what are we doing to the psyche of our young people?
Well, I can attest to that because I must say, at Dube Church, in fact, Babu Oliphant had a tough time, to keep us on the straight and narrow.
Yes.
Because we behaved exactly the same way we behaved during the week.
You get the point.
Everything was the same.
In fact, Manda, I think we must come to a point where we make the rough assessment. Some people may not like this, that we have not begun to be a church. We're a religious movement that goes to church on Saturday. But we have not become the church of the Bible. And that's why God is not going to allow us to grow. Because if we grow, we'll be spoiled in our lostness. Our lostness will be validated by the growth. It's surprising that, of course, the other reason why we're not growing is that God is not going to place the racist church. Because we're going to be confirmed in our racism.
Because maybe next week before we close, I'd like us to revisit those three areas, for example, the 1996, the 2006, and also the current situation in terms of the merger of the church. I actually wanted to finish off with that. But for now, I just want us to zoom on this issue with black churches, with black churchmanship.
Okay.
Now, because it worries me that even, as you say, in the 2020, there are still some churches which are still congregating in schools.
It's a fact.
And it's normal within Adventism.
It's a normal. If we're not, we're hiring a church building of another institution.
Well, that's even better, because at least it's still a church. Yes,
Fine. Now, the issue I think we need to look at is, why has the black church in South Africa been an underdog in terms of development?
Can I pose the question? Are there any white churches which started in schools?
It's possible, but I'm not sure. They could have started in their garages or homes. But by the time the merger, in the early first 10 years of the merger of the unions, 72 white churches in the whole country had been occupied by black people. And whites were complaining in meetings we had at the union that were busy grabbing their churches without adding new churches ourselves. So church, I think, among us had something more to do with the day rather than with the structure. We went to God on Sabbath, but we did not attend church in a building reserved for going to God. And I think over a period of time we tended to. Let me give you an extreme example, and I'll quote the church because it was my church. Do you know that when I lived in Pretoria, I was in the Atteridgeville township? That township is classic for a number of reasons which I'm not going to discuss here. But things got so bad that we even painted the classroom in which we were attending church in such a manner that it would look like a place suitable for worship.
Wow.
Yes. So we're affirming the fact that we are here forever. We're not going to change. There is no building in Atteridgeville to this day owned by the church, as far as I know. There are two churches, all of them are in schools. And this thing has become so common. We think it's Adventist tradition. It's not.
In fact, you're right, because some time ago, I remember going with the Zola Church. We were visiting a church in Durban, Kwantuzuma, I think in Tuzuma North.
Yes.
And guess where it was again? In a school. And everything was done in a school. I mean,
when I'm at home, I go to that church because my family are members of that church.
Is there a church now?
But they've built a beautiful church.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful.
Whose length is longer than this one.
Okay.
But it is a quarter full. Because those who belong to South built a church. So there are two churches in Tuzuma now. Tuzuma North and Tuzuma South.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But there used to be one in the school.
There used to be one. One of the problems we need to note here, Mandla, is that some of our churches have grown out of conflict.
Well, I actually wanted to raise that issue exactly because for me, and maybe why we perpetuate this whole school thing is because our church growth is not necessarily because it's strategic, but like you say, it's born out of quarrels and divisions, etc.
We mutate.
Yes.
We don't grow. We just split. And I can quote a number of churches in Soweto that sprang up out of conflict.
When someone
But
is not,
let's not mention them.
when someone is not chosen as an elder, they
Or when
choose to
somebody is
move on.
classed with somebody else.
Yes.
Or when somebody is supposed to be disfellowshipped.
Yes. And then
It's a bad thing, man. Because, you know, I can quote a classical example that is known by Sowetans. I will not mention the church, but that church was born out of a split. And the procedure that led to its being a recognized church was very unprocedural, based on the church manual and church policy. But some part of because the pastors were in the office were looking for tithe, they gave them the financial books, but they did not give them a church manual or church policy, and they did not supply them with Sabbath school lessons. They did not give them Bibles. But because they were already a clone, standing alone, they needed money from them. It's a wrong view of who we are as church members. And so the mother church felt defaced in some way by the office, because they were now affirming an illegitimate birth. Ultimately, that church was organized into a full-blown church.
Because, you know, I think in my lifetime, I've been probably 4 churches where there has been active building in terms of building a church. I mean, in my early years in Adventism, it's all about being building. We're building. That's the only thing I heard.
But we never built.
Yes, it took forever. I mean, I went to Bethel, we're building Ezola, we're building a Dube. Yeah, even in Mbali Church, for example, when I was there, we're building. Everywhere, we're building. Consequently, we couldn't do really anything because everything was geared towards collecting enough money to build.
And Manda, to add to that, we don't build for mission, we build for worship. Adventist buildings are for church attendance. They are not for the advancement of mission.
Can you go deeper on that, Bamgo? So what do you mean exactly? What's the difference?
You see, the church was designed for mission and not for stasis. That is one of the reasons why we clash in churches, is that the purpose for going to church is wrong. Highly unbiblical. It's for going there to be refreshed and then you go back home. And it's like you are dirty during the week, you are made holy on Sabbath. Okay. And that is why some of us are finding it difficult to manage life now under these conditions.
When you're at home.
When we're at home. Because I'm not supposed to be here for 7 days a week. And what do I do on Saturday now? They have no idea of what to do in the absence of the elder or the deacon and so on. And that's why funds also have been hurt by this condition. My belief is that not long from now, each church, because they are not going to have a session anytime soon, each church should sit down and discuss how church should look like in a post-COVID period. Because we have been hurt. Some of the churches have been hurt permanently. Their members will never go back to their churches because of distance, because of certain conditions. Some have lost work. Some might have things repossessed after this whole thing. Some have changed ideas about what it means to church. One young man says, Bamkosi, that church we're going to open in such a... I would want to mention it now, you know. Why can't we just go there secretly? And because we're busy drinking at home now. I'm telling you, it's trouble. The members who have gone back to where they were before they became Adventists, they've gone back to Egypt. Which is why women abuse has become rife now. You begin to say, what were these guys doing before COVID? Now that they're busy raping their kids, raping their wives and so on. Who were they raping all along? And so I think the COVID experience should give us a wake-up call to say, number one, we were never valid. We existed, but we were never valid. 2, we're not contextual. 3, we were never missional. Secondly, we're not dynamic, and we're not relevant to our context. Therefore, we need to God is giving us an opportunity to rebirth Adventism now, especially the black section of the population.
Bamgos, you spoke about that in our minds, church exists as a center where we go dip ourselves once a week, and then we think we're holy every week. Where is the notion of a church being the center for social upliftment of the area, and through that showing Christ-like behavior, which then in turn will show people what Christianity should look like?
Three things have not happened in the mission field. Number one, believers, converts were never discipled. They were churched. They were missionized into churchmanship. They were never discipled. Which is why most church members have never won a soul, unfortunately starting with their own souls, some of them. Two, in other words, there should have been a heavy discipleship program in the church, especially in countries that were not historically, classically Christian. There should have been a heavy program of discipleship. Now, you can't disciple people you have colonized. It's impossible. Because the moment you start discipling them, they will undergo decolonization. They start asking questions. Why this? Why not that? Why are you doing this at this time? Why are you not doing it at that time? Why is this happening to me and not happening to the other person? Because we were not discipled, because we were regarded as pagans. All we needed was to be brushed. They were removing the dust of what they assumed was heathenism. So the missionaries assumed that by accepting the Sabbath day, coming to church, reading the church manual, listening to preachers, we had been discipled. We have not been discipled. That's why we're not growing. That's why it's easy for me to be hurt and leave the church. In Zola, there used to be a member who left the church because the people were questioning something, and he has never come back. I don't know if the man is still alive. Later, we were told that the man was now in a polygamous situation. He emerges from the Orlando West Church, and they seek for his membership in Zola. And the old ladies who have membership there, some of them are dead, that you know, start saying, no, we can't. This is what happened when this guy left the church. And that's the reply that the Orlando West Church was given. The issue is we did not follow Matthew 28. We Christianized people, but we did not disciple them. The idea was to make us civilized so that we could be compliant with white social and legal thought.
Is that why, therefore, within Adventism, this liturgy is actually much more important than actually the gospel itself?
Certainly it is. That is, people who have been colonized have a tendency of venerating things that are not value to them. I mean, where is the silent prayer in the Bible? Show me that thing.
And we know churches which have broken down because someone
did not
change them.
The silent prayer.
Yes.
How many pray during the silent prayer period? Secondly, I've been fascinated by the period the superintendent spends in the silent prayer. I don't think he hardly makes any prayer himself. So it's a question of nodding, bending down, closing your eyes, and coming back.
Just liturgy, nothing else.
You see, colonized people don't understand the reason why they are going through the tunnel in which they're going through. Yeah. So there needs to be a whole a conference, a convention, not in a session, a convention where we revise colonial Adventism and its damage to black spirituality. Our people believe God more than they did before 1652. They do that before 1652.
Let's talk about some of these things, because you were talking about, obviously, the liturgy of silent prayers, and maybe dress is one of them, for example.
The dress issue is one of them. I'm writing about it in a paper I'm launching recently in the matter of weeks, because Adventists have gone beyond the limits where God had placed them. We want to. We have turned Europeanness into the 29th fundamental belief. If you don't act like a white person, a European, particularly a North American, you are not an Adventist.
You don't look like one. You don't sing like one.
If you don't bring a
be.
tie,
Yes.
if you don't hero worship the King's Heralds, that group that came to Bethel, who are
Heritage,
they? Yeah. If you don't sing like them, if you one group, I don't know if you know that group that used to be in Dubeman, those boys, They left the church now.
Oh, yeah. I know the people
UNIF.
you're talking about.
They,
UNIF, yes.
they went to one of the churches in Soweto.
Yes.
And they sang as they sang.
Yes.
And one of the zealous deacons went to the front, stopped the singing, told them to leave. Those boys, many of them are out of the church today. One of them is running his own church in Soweto because structures are very cold in the Adventist church. People say things like what I used to hear in the Eastern Cape, inyana yofa. Adventists don't mind killing a soul with the truth. I don't think truth that kills is truth. It is vengeance. It is the personalization of the gospel. We have not learned to love as Jesus did. He says to those who were murdering him, while they were killing him, he did not wait until he was dead. He said, forgive them, because they don't know what they're doing. To me, that's the most difficult part of Scripture.
You know,
because I can't do it, yes.
You know, I look back, I go back to the Dube Central Church, where really I spent a lot of time at. You know, we used to have what is called the Dube Youth Singers.
I remember.
A group of young people. It became about 115 members group.
Yeah.
Almost 60% of them were kids who just came to church, walked into church because they loved hearing what was being sung. And no one went out to actually evangelize them. They walked into church. And guess what happened? Most of those, like UNIF, for example, why they're not here? Because of us.
Legalism.
You know, there's one
Part
particular sad situation of this young girl, Bamgoso, who used to sing beautifully. But at home, they didn't want her to come to church. So what she used to do, she would just dress up like she's going to play and then come to church and sing, which offended some of the brethren, because you can't go up to sing wearing shorts. And one of, again, zealous deacons went to her to tell her off that you can't do this, not knowing what's the reason why. The only reason why she did this is so that you can come to church. And I wonder how many, well, in fact, I do have a few examples, but I wonder how many people we've chased away in the name of decorum.
Mandla, we have, in the meditative moments of this COVID thing, I started making a list of young people who came to my home privately. Some called me to say, Baba Siafa, the church is killing us, for a number of reasons. I don't think that was right at all. You know, I sometimes wonder what people are discussing in the elders' councils. Of course, but do accept the fact that only 18% of us grew up in this church. 18%. So many of these elders and deacons who are zealous about a God they've never met have not been converted. They've not been discipled. The idea of running an effort for 2 weeks and baptize people is just off. You read Ellen White carefully. She says a pastor must not leave a congregation until there is a church there. This idea of itinerating preachers, there's nothing wrong with it, but you can't conduct an effort and then and then part, baptize people and then leave. What happens post those people? Post your departure. Let me tell you an example. There's no record of all the 700 people plus who were baptized after that guy from the
Fitzhenry.
No, the white man who came, who was the vice president of the General Conference. Who was that?
I don't think I went there.
Yeah, this thing was in Chabavane?
Yeah,
somewhere there.
I didn't.
That effort is over 700 people baptized in what's the stadium?
Ellis Park.
Ellis Park.
Yes.
No one has a record of the names. What's that? Some of the members, I know members who were in full and regular standing who got rebaptized without their churches knowing. Who voted for their baptism? Why did they go back to the water? What were they trying to? So we use baptism as a way to clean our bad consciences. Ellen White, it's also, Mandla, something perhaps very important here. When Ellen White discusses the Lord's Supper, And you read it in the pastor's manual. The Lord's Supper is such an important thing. Ellen White says, we are cleansed, we are rebaptized.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah. In other words, don't come here, go to a camp meeting, and then say, "Yosnigela food." What was happening each quarter? You went to the Lord's Supper. By the way, if you go back to our church history, the Lord's Supper was every Sabbath. Yeah. Until the brethren felt, if we do it every week, because of the word expression as often as, it might become very trite. So they went for a quarterly process. Okay. So it's not biblical, it's policy. So we can have the Lord's Supper every
just like the Methodists and the Anglicans.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And you know, experiment with that one day and say make it every month. You will see a change in the spirituality of your church membership.
Now let's talk about some of these other things which bother, especially young people. Music.
Yeah.
I sat in one church board again in my old church, Dube Central Church, and because of the Dube Youth Singers again, and they were experimenting, they're singing very African songs, you know, and unfortunately my brother was very much like instrumental in that. And I remember this one man says, no. We can't allow these guys to sing these songs. They are not Adventist songs.
What are Adventist songs?
That was my question exactly. You know, no, Christian Ngomeni was the answer. And again, I followed up with that in terms of how many of the songs in the, Christian Ngomeni are actually Adventist inspired. In fact, they've been actually authored by Adventists. And they didn't know.
I'm glad we came to this point because I had thought we'd reserve a special session on the question of hymnody. But let's be blunt about this thing. Every time a new religious formation is created, people bring a hymnody they already know. Yeah, they don't create a hymnody. In 1844, people sang songs from all those 18 churches from which they came. Yeah,
which is why a lot of our music is very much linked to Methodists,
yes,
etc. Yes,
that's right. The composers were not Adventists. Even now, to the extent that, for your interest, when the General Conference introduced the church manual, which was the first official hymn book of the church, not the Christing Song. The Christing Song was created by Franklin Belden, a nephew of Ellen White. In fact, he died outside of the church because he felt he was not given the rightful, what we call payment of work done.
Or royalties.
Royalties, yes. Royalties that he had expected. He left the church and died, I think, in 1945. Wow. And for all these years, we've been singing his compilation, Christing Song. When in the United States, the church introduced the church manual, and noticed that people were resisting it because an aura of godliness had affected the church, the Christian song.
Yes,
people refused to surrender. The church surrendered. The people refused. They took the church hymnal and they kept the church, the Christian song. By the way, in the 1985 General Conference, the General Conference issued souvenir copies of the Christian song to bid it farewell from history.
Okay.
Yes. People who went to the GC that year got those copies. Mine, they end up putting the fire together with the master, while the plantation nigger is praying for more wind to blow in the direction of the house.
But because same thing also with instruments, for example. I know churches where kids are not allowed to play drums, guitars, all of those things. And I know we've had similar issues, for example, at Dube with some older folks, but over time, they came along. What is it?
There are people who still don't like a guitar in church. Let me tell you, it comes from the Dark and the Middle Ages. Remember that in the Catholic Church, for all the centuries before the Reformation, there was one part singing. The church taught that if you sing in two parts or three parts or four parts, you are imitating the devil. And that is why most European traditional singing has been chanting. Yes, it comes from that idea that once you go into parts, you are imitating the devil. And they also believed that there were certain instruments that were more heavenly than others.
Based on what?
Based on their theories.
Okay.
Theories. The guitar was castigated as the devil's attempt to imitate the violin. Yes.
Also, the violin was...
The violin was holy.
holy.
The guitar was unholy.
Okay,
You get
okay.
the point.
And the drums?
And the drums, well, let me tell you this. You know this guy called Johann Esbach, who composed Jesus, Joy of Man's
Jesus
Desire.
Joy,
He
yes.
was the last church musician in European history.
Hmm.
When Bo Handel came after him and started giving strong rhythm to music, the church said, this is pagan. We can't take this. It must be inspired from another kingdom. And Adventists
Yes.
came here and took us back to the dark ages, the missionaries. And that's why Adventists are generally averse to rhythm. I'm going to say something here that might sound xenophobic. It's not an act of xenophobia. Most Adventists who come from north of our borders, not necessarily Zimbabwe, but from the north up to the equator, have a certain view of Adventist thought and culture, which is very archaic, strictly conservative. They're always in ties and suits. Some of these suits don't fit them, and strange colors sometimes. They just believe nothing else but what the missionaries deposited here. And I can tell you, we've become a laughing stock to the current generation. In my church, did I tell this some time ago? I went to church without a tie for 3 Sabbaths. I was trying to check something. I was never asked to pray. I was never asked to preach. There was a time when they needed some. I just wanted to test how strong this thing is. One time, 4 years ago, guys from Zimbabwe asked me, during lunchtime in Zola, why do guys move bodies in the church? I said, because you guys were colonized by missionaries, not by colonies. But the missionaries colonized you. They taught you something totally un-African. We dance in this continent. The Jews dance. The Bible says you must even dance to the Lord. There is instrumentation, heavy instrumentation in the Bible. David created an
Psalms,
orchestra. Yes, there was an orchestra. Even Paul. Paul even goes to classify music, talks about spirituals, talks about hymns, talks about praise songs. So in the church, we just want to use one category of music, of music.
The reverent one.
I know. The be silent, be silent.
Because my experience, I went to the US, and I think for the first time in 1991.
Yes.
And I remember visiting one church there in Amherst, just south of Boston, where the late Ubabum Tweko used to worship. Yes. And so I went to visit there with them. And I was coming from obviously our old conservative
KJV
yes
type. Yes.
And I remember when I got to the church and the superintendent was wearing their pants and and with earrings and everything else. Yaphuma inkonzo baba Nkosi. Yaphuma inkonzo. And
you've actually disfellowshipped them.
I couldn't hear anything thereafter. And it took Umenzi. Umenzi said to me, Mandla, you need to understand, God is bigger than these things. God is not afraid of pens. God is not afraid of earrings. Don't protect God from things He's not afraid of.
Yeah.
Focus on what is important. And I learned from that time on. And I know that a lot of our members also were equally shocked. I remember when, who was the gentleman, the president from the GC who came down, Falkenberg,
yes.
And his family, because they were not traditional.
No,
Adventists.
Falkenberg was
and I remember we were there at that place in the East End.
That's right.
Yes, a lot of brethren stood outside because they could not understand and tolerate why these people are dressed like this and all of this thing. And this is a president. This is coming from the cradle of Adventism, the GC. And I must say, but having traveled widely and seeing, for example, how in other cultures they have embraced Adventism together with their culture, and it was acceptable. What is it about Africans that we still find ourselves and act as strangers to the gospel. That in order for me to be truly converted, to feel that I'm holy, I need to be an African. I need to mimic someone else in Europe or in North America so that I can be accepted to God.
Yes, Mandla, while you are speaking, I'm toying with the idea that perhaps the whole question of liturgy and worship should be a discourse post these programs. And it should not just be a platform issue. Okay. We need now conferences post-COVID or during COVID where we recondition Black Adventism. It's not genuine to who we are. I think I spoke to you about Pastor Pubene.
Yes.
Who got worried when he came to this church and saw us singing from hymns. Says, Nkosi, you mean you have been singing from this hymn since birth? You don't know these hymnals. Why do people always call numbers there? Why can't they sing? And he had wanted to become a member of the church, but he left. Because he said, I'm going to die here. You know, he phones me almost every week. He's in the north now, resting until this thing is over. He phones me. Actually, there's something I need to discuss with you, which he wants to do with us as Adventists. Because he's sick and tired of the current conventional education system. Yeah. He has got his own theories about why African kids fail at school. But the point, Mandla, is I think it's good that we had this experience of COVID so that we could have time to re-look at who we are, where things got lost, what we need to go back and pick, and the type of new provision we need to pass to our young people.
Now, Bamko, still on issues of church growth and, for example, within Adventism, one of the things which, because of our experience, for example, at the Calvin and Athol Church, trying to, it took us almost 15 years to actually find a suitable site.
I remember.
And we were all over. And one of the things which I remember we were told by the Joburg City Council, for example, was that we will no longer be issuing licenses to Adventist Church, particularly. And I was like, why? They said, the problem with Adventism is that you guys, you have 20 small churches in a radius of 5 kilometers, each with 100 people, etc., etc. And within an urban environment, that's not sustainable because you don't have enough land. So what they're saying, for example, that for every one Methodist church, there is 7 Adventist churches.
Very interesting statistic.
And consequently, therefore, it's saying to us, they are saying, and they're also saying that maybe the move to mega churches within the urban areas is what we need to do.
Or convert structures into churches. What these these African foreign countries have done with there's almost a church in every street in Joburg now. Have you noticed?
Yes.
Around the Orange Grove, every
Yes.
street there,
Yes.
every street there has a church. There's
Yes.
even Ethiopian church and so on. One thing, Mandla, that I think all colonized communities go through is the refusal to look beyond the model that the colonizer gave them. Because we ordain the colonial model, sanctify it and dedicate it to God. For instance, the traditional school is dead now. We no longer need to be in long trains called classrooms. The classroom can be anywhere now. God is trying to say to us, be in touch with the universe. The universe is worshiping God, not in buildings, not in classrooms. Wherever you are, be what God had expected to do. What's going to happen the day the government legislates against Adventism as an institution? Because our properties will be taken away. If people are stressed by what is happening now, many will collapse then. But before that time comes, we need to change the methodology. Perhaps the other thing that might need to happen is for us to start strengthening small cells. Yeah. Because we may not be able to run mega churches.
Yes.
Yeah. They've got their own dynamics. By the way, when you do clinical studies on church growth, you are then asked to deal with the members within a church growth model. It has been found by those who do clinical work in church growth studies, that even the spirituality of a member needs to be studied. There are members who thrive in a big church. Others thrive in a small church. There are members who thrive when the pastor is visible. There are members who don't care about the pastor as long as they've been built, discipled sufficiently. They've got enough petrol to run on their own. And we have not gone. So while we are dealing with the institution, we must go to a point where we do member profiling. Why does so-and-so come to church once a month? Why is he away from church more often than not? Why does this one come to church? He just keeps quiet the whole day. Have you not been surprised sometimes you ask questions in church and people give you strange answers? And you say, but this guy's been here since 1950. How could he give it? You might find something did not land on him.
Yeah.
Because mass preaching sometimes misses the individual.
You know, because there's a church not far from where I live. When I moved into that area, about 1998, the church was a 200-seater.
Okay.
Fast track to now. The church has an auditorium of 3,500, which is packed to capacity every Sunday.
Look at that.
And it's packed to capacity every Sunday, and they run 3 services. All of them packed. What they also do have is, like you said, look at things like cell groups and etc. and all of those other things. And I look at us and I say, what is it about Adventism which wants to stay with what was given to them, like you say, by the missionaries? Why can't we learn things which work and actually then adapt ourselves and our strategies to make sure that we actually advance God's work? You know.
Do you know why we have the 11 o'clock service? Because of slavery. Every slave master was required, they made a consensus that at 11 o'clock every day, but not on Sunday, they would take the slaves to be brainwashed there. And so the 11 o'clock divine hour comes from slavery. What's wrong with having the divine hour too? What's wrong?
Well, we've had those issues here at Calvin where we sometimes set church at 3 in the afternoon, and I know a lot of members just get disoriented because, again, we believe the liturgy is very important.
Yes,
you can't not sing Udumisanu Jehovah.
You get the point.
Why? Even if you find a much more suitable hymn, no, you need to sing that one. You know.
People are detail focused. They are not spirit focused. Now, many people have cursed Calvin, by the way. I think you know that.
Yes.
For being unconventional. And I've often said, look here, there are spirituality types. My wife, your cousin, your friend may not have the same spiritual culture that you have. Because I've traveled a lot, I've seen many Adventist models. Some of them laughable, some have said, I don't mind being anywhere, except if I'm not enhanced. If I'm not enhanced, I leave. I've learned never to waste time with churches that are not prepared to be in tomorrow. Churches that want to go back to yesterday. And I think post this program, we need, as churches now, a discussion. Do we still want to be church, or do we want to stay as that factory of souls that we kept before COVID? And one of the things we need to do as a church is to keep, for instance, business meetings. One of the functions of a business meeting is to review if things are fine with everybody. Are we going to where we had hoped to go? Why is so-and-so no longer coming to church? Would it be fine for us to come to church on Saturday, on Wednesday evening only? Those of you who can't come to church on Sabbath, how far are you? Things of that nature. And of course, the other thing is that we have been bound by organizational systems, some of which are not in the Bible. You remember that the Jews never traveled more than 5 kilometers to church, yes. When I was in Nazarene High School in Swaziland, the chaplain, Mr. Ndlovu, who didn't know much English, once pulled me to a corner and said, what do your people want here every Saturday? The distance is 8 kilometers, man. Why do you call him? You know, I was too small. I think I was in Form 1. I couldn't answer him. I knew that the Jews did not travel that much, but I also accepted the fact that we are no longer in the Jewish dispensation, but I could not give him a sensible answer. But you know, when I think of that experience now, I know he was holding to Old Testament Jewish practices. Did I tell you about friends who were in a lift in Jerusalem?
No.
Right. The TC took some of his workers to Palestine some 2-3 years ago. So this lady is in the 5th floor. Everybody else is on the 4th floor, on the 1st floor. And on Sabbath, she has to go down to them to meet them. And she gets into the lift. And when she gets to a certain floor where an old man and old woman walked in, they are citizens of Israel. And the door opened, and she assumed that it was they who had pressed the button. When she stretched her finger to press ground, they said, no, it's Sabbath, you don't press. Don't. On Sabbath, the lifts are designed to stop at every floor. You know, I was fascinated by that. I was saying, many Jews might be saved, even though they're technical Sabbath keepers, because they've gone beyond the letter. Even made this whole thing mechanical. But I would never go to that extent. So the lift also keeps the Sabbath there.
But because, you know, I know that the challenge of COVID obviously has really frustrated a lot of churches and members. You know, when was it? 2002, when this church was, 2001, I think, in November 23rd, when this branch, Calvin on Athol, was actually formed. I remember Makubela and I, we were presenting the model in terms of saying what we want the church to be. We spoke about the social church with the school and all of those things, reaching out to communities. We spoke about, for example, using, technology, things like, you know, internet, etc., to actually advance the mission. Hence, for example, the e-ministries and all of those other things. You know, I remember a conversation with one of the brethren who said to us, you guys, I see you put a budget of 20 million rand. You guys are crazy. Where do you think you get that? You're just dreaming too much. And I fast-tracked to now. Most of the things we said then actually have happened. And I'm saying, shouldn't you be sitting down now as a church body to say, post-COVID and even beyond, what are the emerging trends? Where should we be focusing on? What are the kind of things we need to be doing as a church to be relevant then? Because COVID cost a lot of our churches, actually. That is why, you know, we only started seeing a lot of Adventist churches mid-COVID. We're running to various stations to try and do something because they didn't have any plan at all. What should be the major learning from this?
I think out of the COVID experience, we should, number one, from a prophetic point of view, know that the Bible has been true all along. The troublous times will come. I'm seeing the evidences of distress of nations, as the Bible says. But at the same time, this is a new context for innovative mission. And God is going to force us into crisis so that He facilitates the finishing of the work. Look at the number of people we speak to every Sabbath. They would not be here because of the size of this place. I've been phoned by people from Cape Town. I've been phoned by people from home in Durban. Some have been told by others. There are guys in Springs who are always viewing this thing, but they would never be here. So it is one reason why I want to give all my support to Kelvin is that for some of us, this church has given us an out, even though we may not participate in your services every day, but we have expanded the scope within which our souls can grow into relevant witnesses for Jesus Christ in this age.
You know, I think this is one of the things which we are learning also as a church, to know that our church is bigger than the church, which is present. Because we have seen in some days where, for example, we have 19,000 people out there, and we only have 300 people in here.
You get the point.
So you need to really be mindful of just not only looking at the needs of those who are around you, but also beyond. And lastly, Bamgosi, you know what? We never really got to touch on this because I wanted us maybe to talk about some of the church's experiences, for example, you know, of growing, where they come from, etc. But maybe it's a challenge which can go to all our master guides, our pathfinders. Take time to find out who built your church. What struggles did they go through?
Yes.
Where are the tears? Who cried those tears? And what can we do as churches, local churches, to make sure that we honor those ladies and gentlemen in areas? I mean, I know, for example, in my area at Dube, I know that Otat Majola, Otat Bendile, Ogok Mashile, you know, the Sibegos, Mam Dlamini, Umfundis Malot, Umfundis Totiti, Umfundis Mueping, you know, all of these people, you know, Mam Kosa, Mam Shinin, Mam Patela, the Mjapilas, all of these people, those are the pillars which that church stands on their shoulders. And as we sit and as we go through as members these days, what legacy are we building?
It's unfortunate that we over-concentrate on struggles we're going through. And in these struggles, I have to create innovation among us. There are things we need to do, Putmandla. First, we need to go back. We need a multi-pronged strategy now. Guys who are going to collect the lost past, bring it here. Guys who are going to say, how do we match this past with the present? As you spoke about the old people, I was thinking of Miss Batsela. She's still alive. She and the father started that school in 1950, between 50 and 53. And sometimes when I meet her, she just mourns at what is happening there. Why can't we honor her by renaming that school? Batsela Memorial Primary School. When there's so many memorials in the name of white people. You get the point? And she's going to die sorrowful in her heart. But that's just one example. All I'm trying to say is I think out of the COVID experience, we should be able to say, God has been with us. Thank God for keeping some of us to this stage so that we can look back and say, where do we come from? Which rivers did we cross? How did God save us? Let's thank Him. But what is He saying to us now? And then create a new path forward.
On that note, thank you very much, Bamgosi. Join us again next week as we continue with our final episode in this series of our story. God bless. Good day.
Silale mi kukwin Agupho Mehluko kulelizwe Kaula makamandela